Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. As an evolving spirit and change adventure navigator, it is Kate's mission to empower and guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts, speak your truth, and ignite your inner wisdom and purpose. She hopes to do so with a little humor and grace and her own soulfire passion. Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soulfire wisdom. Now here's your host, Kate.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom and Totally Awesome, Try Something New and Talk About It Tuesday. So what I tried this week was a little bit of a necessity. I managed to injure myself on my recent trip trying to take care of my still remaining storage and ended up hurting my back and hip. And by the time I got home, it turned out to be fairly painful. And it's been remaining painful for about a week now. And I've tried everything, pain pills and every rub you can think of and hot and cold compacts. So finally, I decided to try one of those pain patches. And I have to say, it did work very well so far. And I've had injuries where it hurt, but I've never had chronic ongoing pain that didn't go away no matter what you did. So I was going a little bit crazy with it. I mean, I've had clients that told me about their chronic pain. And now I know that my advice to them maybe was a little bit simplistic because I didn't really realize what that chronic pain takes out of you. And now I do. And just the relief from that pain that the pain patch has given me is really much appreciated. And I'm letting it heal, hopefully. And so thumbs up for the pain patch. Now, I have a great guest planned for today for the show, which is a driving passion, and I meant that really literally. Mi Ae Lipe is an editor and graphic designer in the Seattle area, but she has a kind of a little secret second life as a traffic safety advocate. And I was kind of surprised to find this out with all of the different interests that Mi Ae has. I had her on my prior show, Embrace Change with Kate, and that was about her book that she's written, Bounty from the Box, which is a recipe book using CSA farm products. And anyway, it surprised me that her driving blog and safety advocacy is really her passion. So she writes a blog, which is called Driving in the Real World. She tweets daily safety tips and news links at Driving Real. And she writes a regular column for street driving for BMW CSAs in Rondell magazine. She's a past recipient of the NHTSA Award for public service for her work in driver training in Washington State. And she's also member of the Transportation um, it's a subcommittee on autonomous vehicles. So, hi, Amy.
Hello, Kate. So
How are
nice.
you?
Good, good. And thank you for letting me
I
be
know
on
it's
your
not
show.
really secret, but a lot of people don't know that you do that.
Right. So you're probably curious about how I got started. Most people ask me that question. And
Before you tell how you got started, can you I gave a little bit of information, but give people a brief synopsis of your background and
okay.
get to how you got to writing this driver safety blog.
Right. So I am, as you said, I'm a freelance book editor and designer who lives and works in Seattle. I've been doing that for many years, but as you said, I have a lot of other interests, and one of them is traffic safety, which I got into partly because, well, there were a few reasons, but to start out with, I have been crazy about cars since I was a kid. I fell in love with cars when I was about 10 or 11. And I was one of those kids that really wanted to get into the automotive world. I wanted to work in it, to be an automotive designer, actually, or to do quality control testing, which sounds really strange, but that was really my passion. And I was also one of those kids in high school. I could not wait to get my driver's license. And so I got my license when I was 18, and I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And right away after I got my license, I got a job where I drove cars for a living. So I worked for several different car rental agencies. So I worked out of San Francisco International Airport. And I used to do kind of the short runs around the airport, just transporting cars around the lot. But then quickly that got boring. And so I ended up doing kind of longer haul driving in different locations around the Bay Area. So for instance, if people check in, they return a whole bunch of cars on a weekend evening. Those cars flood the lot and they have to get out of there and be moved to other locations. So that's essentially what I and a whole crew of people did. And it didn't take me long with that experience to realize that anything that I learned in high school driver's ed, which was taught by a PE teacher, actually, really didn't seem to apply that much. It was very helpful to my getting through the day on the job. And so, and that, as an 18-year-old and, I'm not having much life experience. And when you first get your license, you think it's a lot of freedom and, you know how to drive and you're excited about it. But it turns out, of course, that it's just the beginning of learning really how to drive, except that this time I was on the job. So to have the usual little minor fender benders and close calls, that's a big deal when you're actually working and driving for a living. So I was always very struck by that disconnect. And when I went on to move to different states afterward in my adult life, I would, be waiting at the Department of Licensing office waiting to get a new license. And I'd flip through those little motorist handbooks, that you see where people can study to bone up for their drive test. And I realized there was so much in those books that was just maybe a starting point. But again, it did not seem to really reflect what actually goes on the road. And so that has just stuck with me all those years. So here we are 30 years later. I decided about 10 years ago that I was just tired of all the bad driving around me. So I live in Seattle. I mean, it's a very congested metropolitan area. And I also drive a lot cross country because I've always had family between here and Wisconsin. So I drive a lot cross country. So I have seen, especially in the last 10 years, 5 years, a real deterioration, I think, in the conduct of people out on the road in general. And I just literally just got so tired of it one day that I decided I would just do something about it. So it may sound a little naive, a little overconfident, but I was always sure that I could do something constructive in that field. So that's when I started my blog, Driving in the Real World. And I decided that at first I would write a book about driving technique, but I quickly realized that it probably would just join all the other driving technique books that have been written and have gone up to the book heaven in the sky, and that it would be better if I worked as a change agent, and whatever form that change agent would be, whether it be writing or communications or working with people, that's how I would probably be more effective. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what I've gone on to do.
Yeah, I didn't even know that history of how you had, started way back in high school with this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually what I like about Mi Ae. She's my former neighbor, and almost every time I talk to her, I find out something new about either what she's doing or what she's done in the past.
Something either useful or not so much.
Well, interesting. So what is the purpose of driving in the real world? What do you...
Yeah, so it still remains as a change agent. I would say my best strengths are as a communicator. So I'm an editor and a graphic designer in the real world. So it kind of makes sense. I'm also a writer. So I find that I'm best at writing pieces. So for instance, I write for the BMW Car Club of America's national magazine called Roundel. So I write a column, a monthly column in the magazine, which is for members only. You have to subscribe to the CCA to get it. But it's a monthly column, and I tackle two specific subjects in my work in general. And that's, one of them is street driving techniques specifically. So, very specific techniques about how to look, things to pay attention to, all kinds of techniques with driving, whether it's winter driving, urban driving, driving at night, things pertaining to that, about the process of driving. But the other thing that I really enjoy is trying to shift people's perspectives on their attitude toward traffic safety. So, we all hear examples of numbers and statistics and that kind of thing, of this many deaths and so on given. I try to get beyond that because, we're all tired of, we've heard the numbers. It doesn't really affect us, most of us, unfortunately. But I try to get beyond the numbers and to really kind of look through a social sciences mirror. So if I can tell a story or relate to a scenario where, we can all identify with it, like somebody cut us off, for instance, or we felt violated or angered by what somebody did on the road. If I can kind of build that empathy and then gradually kind of turn that around so that I kind of go into the things that contributed to that whole scenario and then what we can do about that. That's kind of how I like to approach those things, so that hopefully by the time somebody is finished reading the article, then they have, they kind of see themselves sort of in the mirror there, and they might think a little bit more about the next time that they get behind the wheel, like, what is my role in this? And what could I be doing better? And how can I be a better citizen when I see something or I want to react to something? So that's kind of an example of that. So,
so is that your philosophy on driving, or do you have a specific philosophy?
I do. I have many different philosophies, actually. One is, I guess the simplest thing is, I feel like many agencies and organizations and governments, they mean well by running different kinds of traffic safety campaigns where, don't do this, don't do that. But it feels very punitive, and it feels like it's not very effective much of the time. I mean, how many of us like to be scolded, for speeding or doing this or that? I'm really more of the feeling that forcing people into compliance is not very effective many times. And I'm not saying that you don't need enforcement and penalties. I think that is a necessary part. But I believe that people are much more moved by positive reinforcement. And also, if we really put traffic safety in perspective, what we tend to hear about are the people who are really reckless or dangerous, like deliberately so, like people who drink a lot and they get behind the wheel, or young males, for instance, drag racing on the street, that kind of thing. That's what gets the most attention. But in actuality, if you really stop to think about it and you start to pick apart some of the numbers, traffic safety statistics do not measure the close calls. So when we think about where those close calls come from, it's just everyday people like us who they are making everyday mistakes based on everyday assumptions. And, the truth is we just don't know what we don't know, and that's not necessarily our fault. But I look at society more from that lens of wanting to be supportive, helpful, give people constructive advice and tips.
What is the biggest thing you've learned about traffic safety from, working in this field and doing what you do?
Well, I think some of the biggest challenges, I think, are not to be discouraged because there's certainly a lot being done. But the traffic safety deaths have actually have continued to rise in many respects. So one has to really think for the long haul, I guess, in working in this. I have found in working with state government and so on that there are many incredible people who are working in the field who have really good intentions, but sometimes I feel that people are not always asking the right questions. It's easy to sort of pick low-hanging fruit, like a goal, and maybe to focus too closely on one specific thing, like anti-speeding or anti-distraction. But the really big things that really make a big difference in traffic safety, they can't be done piecemeal, and you have to know what your long-term goal is and what you need to do to build a bigger ecosystem for traffic safety. So this is obviously for traffic safety professionals and agencies and that kind of thing, for the strategies that they might have to transmit down all the way to the general public. And I think for the general public, if I can just say this really quickly, the general public, each of us does have a role to play and in doing this. And so I think that's important to not lose sight of that and to stay hopeful and to work at it ourselves.
So what's the most common question you get from the general public on driver safety?
Well, interestingly enough, these days it's actually more about autonomous cars. People are really interested in that. And I work as a part of a safety subcommittee on an autonomous vehicle work group in Washington state government. So there, of course, has been a lot of media hype about that. And there's a lot of amazing technology out there. And some of that technology actually is in our cars right now that we're driving today in the form of ADAS, which is an acronym for Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. So you may have this very technology on your car where maybe your car automatically brakes for you if it senses an obstacle, or it may keep you from drifting out of your lane, that sort of thing. And there's ways that those technologies can really help us to get down those injuries. and deaths, but it's also technology you should not entirely rely on. But I'd say on the whole, it does more good than harm. But people are really interested in the whole autonomous vehicle scene.
So do you see autonomous cars as something that's going to happen in the...
There's absolutely no doubt that it will happen. I don't think that it's going to filter down to us having our own personal autonomous vehicles anytime soon. That's at least probably 20 or 30 years away because of the technology and the economics involved. But where you will see it will be in things like rideshare vehicles and shuttles and delivery as well. So these are vehicles that are what they call geo-fenced. So they're programmed to follow a specific route and always stay to that specific route.
So you think we'll have a delivery vehicle? Will there be a robot that comes in?
Absolutely, yes, yes. And it's probably coming closer to us than we think, especially where you are, Kate, in Arizona, because Arizona is one of the few states that actually has these things in play already.
Oh, do you know that I read that they consider Arizona as one of the states with the most reckless drivers?
I'm not surprised. I've been in Arizona, and I know that it's a little difficult there. So.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of traffic where I am, but up in the Phoenix area, it has seemed a little reminded me of Seattle.
Well, the interesting thing about driving is that the further I get into this field, the more I realize that we all drive exactly as we are as people. So if you examine your own personality and how you go about the day and how much of a hurry you're in and whether you're optimistic or pessimistic in your outlook and whether you plan ahead or if you just kind of think in the moment, maybe if you're scattered or if you're good at focusing, all those things really directly affect how you drive. So might be fun for some of your listeners to think about that the next time they get in the vehicle. So
is there one tip that could, like improve somebody's driving the next time they get in their car? And
yeah, I would kind of boil it down to 5 words, and that's really pay attention and stay patient. Very simple things, but paying attention, of course, that touches on distraction. So distraction, we hear about the smartphones, of course, and that's the most prevalent, but it's not the only form of distraction. But distraction's a little tricky in that we, by nature as humans, if you really examine the social sciences, we're designed to be very distractible by nature. So rather than just having somebody say, well, don't be distracted, that's not really a realistic thing. So I think what we need to do is to work on sort of staying, we have to work at it. It's like a skill, like anything else, and it's a habit. So you have to work on the habit of if you are going to be distracted, let yourself be distracted by what you need to watch for on the road. So I have found in taking driver training of all different types that I had never realized before I took a certain kind of driver training how many hazards there could be, even on a very quiet, seemingly calm road where there's nothing happening. So if you learn to watch for the hazards and be constantly thinking about what could happen, that's one way that you can kind of take that distraction, your mental tendency to want to be looking and thinking about all sorts of things. If you maybe channel that to where you're going and on the road to be looking for those things, that's one technique. And then to address the other part about being patient, really just people are too much in a hurry these days. So we all see that with people tailgating behind us, or if your light turns green or you're at a stop sign, and if you don't start to accelerate the nanosecond that things turn green and you've got somebody honking behind you, well, there's really no reason for that. It's just it's really a matter of just staying a little more patient, just chilling. And I realize that people are really stressed these days, but again, we're all a community sharing the road. So the more that you can be patient and not be rattled yourself, this is the other thing, is that people really copy one another on the road, whether they realize it or not. So if you're in the company of people who are speeding or tailgating or being kind of aggressive, you don't even realize that that can have an effect on you and kind of push you to sort of do the same thing bit by bit yourself. So that's another reason why all of us could use being more patient, is just to, to give a green light to that kind of behavior and to just make the energy different on the road.
So you did actually write an ebook on driving tips. So can you tell us what's in that book and how does somebody get that?
So it's a little 16-page ebook, so you can actually get it off my website. So this is what the front cover looks like, if you can see it. Here it's the sound of no car crashing. It's a guide to protective
driving. That's a good sound. I like that.
It's a guide to protective driving. And I use the word protective and not defensive, because I've never liked the word defensive, because it has kind of negative connotations. And so really, I think the goal is that we want to be protective in our driving, protecting of ourselves and other people around us. So this is just a 16-page little ebook. It gives you tips about vision. Turns out there's a lot of reasons why we don't see things properly on the road and why we miss a lot of things, all the way to distraction. So like dealing with your smartphone, dealing with when you're surprised, how not to be surprised by things happening on the road, like an animal running out in front of you, gives you very practical tips on what to do if that happens. And then also some exercises on how you could have prevented that, for instance, or how you can be mentally more ready for those kinds of things. So it's an easy read. It's for free on my website. So just go to my website and sign in. You have to just register with an email, and then you can download it for free.
Okay, well, so I know that you've gone on a lot of road trips, and so is there any advice that you would give people for, being more comfortable, more safe, and enjoying road trips?
Yes, well, one is just to be really aware of the seasons, the weather and the conditions that you're going to go out in. So I travel all seasons of the year, including in the winter. And in fact, actually, I'm going to be coming out with another ebook next year that is about road tripping on all 4 seasons. So you might want to watch out for that in early spring. I would say, just be prepared. Make sure that your car is properly equipped, of course. So there's the fitness for your car, and then there's the fitness for the driver. So what I mean by that is, if for instance, you're going to go out in the winter, there may be snow or ice, getting something like winter tires is one of the best things that you can do. Obviously, checking fluids, making sure your tires are properly inflated, and many people actually drive with underinflated tires, and that can cause a lot of problems. So there is that sort of thing, just making sure your car is maintained, your vehicle is maintained. But then the other part of it too is making sure that you as the driver are fit. So I view, this may sound a little extreme, but I view being safe on the road and also being able to enjoy the road as something that one needs to be kind of physically fit for. So what do I mean by that? It means that you need to get some adequate sleep. So I have had problems myself being a drowsy driver many times. It's something I've fought with ever since I was 18, and I've had a couple of near fatal crashes because of that.
Wow.
So I know firsthand how that can be. So if you need the rest, don't hesitate to pull off, do what you need to do to rectify that. And really, sleep is the best thing, even if it's a short cat nap. But also even simple things like making sure you get good nutrition. And it affects people more than they might think. So unfortunately, we all know that roadside food and convenience food is awful for us. It tends to be really high in fat and carbs and just things that our body just doesn't like. We don't get really good nutrients from it. So I have found for myself, one of the better things to do is to pack. Go grocery shopping, get things like fresh fruits and vegetables. And so this is just one example because, by eating fresh food or food that is healthier, not only gets you the nutrients you need, but also doing something like eating a fruit or a vegetable instead of a burger, it can get you more fluid in your body, like fruits and vegetables are a good source of water. So it helps to hydrate you, keep you hydrated, which also helps to add to your alertness. But you also don't have to go to the bathroom so much too. So it's kind of simple things like that that can really help you feel better and just be better equipped to drive, both physically and mentally.
So I know that you actually drove for Lyft for a while, or tried that experience.
I did.
What did you learn anything from that was of interest?
It was really interesting. Yes, I drove for Uber and Lyft for about 3 months solidly in 2018 because I had sort of a low on freelance work, and I also thought it would be great, be great field research, really. So it's, it gave me a very different window about what it's like to drive for those companies. And I know that many people who have used Uber and Lyft, they often complain, myself included, as an Uber user, about really scary trips with drivers, who really didn't seem to know what they were doing, or they were reckless, or maybe they didn't have a lot of driving experience. And so absolutely no judgment on people. But I think one of the most revealing things is just the sheer amount of distraction that is involved in driving for Uber and Lyft. After all, it is a business that is based on the driver having to pay attention, constant attention to their phone, because you have to use your phone to access the app and to do navigation and field incoming calls and messages and pings. So that, and the fact that many people call on Uber and Lyft during some of the most difficult driving times, like you imagine if a Seahawks game gets out, football game gets out at the stadium, and you're dealing with just pandemonium on the streets, lots of pedestrians, people who are like trying to figure out where they're going, they're not really paying attention. That kind of thing. And then you're also getting pinged at the same time, and you're having to deal with navigation and looking for passengers, etc. So that gets really hairy, and I can totally understand how drivers can make mistakes, how there can be really unsafe situations there. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, although the rideshare companies have tried, to some extent to increase driver safety, I found that the pressure that they put on drivers to continue to work and also to rush to things is something that is hard for me to forgive. Honestly, there is the subtle pressure on drivers that, you'll get such and such bonus points, meaning you'll get a cash incentive if you complete, for instance, like 4 trips in a row. So maybe you really need to go to the bathroom. Maybe you're really distracted by something. Maybe you just need to take a rest, but you're being pulled constantly by this little cash incentive. I just got to keep going. I can't log off, whatnot. And I think that's really not a good thing to keep perpetuating. And besides that, there is no training whatsoever to use these apps. zero whatsoever. So you pretty much just have to learn on the job. And I think there's there's a disservice to drivers and passengers alike with that.
Okay, well, good to know.
Yeah.
I have had some of those rides that you wondered about a bit.
Yeah, well, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't use them either. I think that they do provide a very valuable service, and it was amazing the people that I met and the reasons why they needed transportation. And I think that's another interesting thing about traffic safety is we are all in traffic safety, whether we like it or not, and even if we're just walking across the street, we're a part of traffic safety. So. You don't have to be a driver, obviously. You can be a bicyclist or a walker or a motorcyclist. So,
Yeah. So this is a question I've been asking all my guests lately. It's a little bit off topic, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So what has surprised you most about life so far?
in general, or this year, or in general?
In general, about life so far, no specific.
Okay, well, that's a good one. I think I can actually think of a halfway intelligible answer now. As we've talked about before, I have a lot of interests, and I'm really into creativity. So I think one thing that has really struck me in so many areas is just how humans continue to be incredibly creative and in figuring out solutions to problems, or to express beauty, or to uplift humanity in some way. So I say that as an artist. I say that as somebody who would have loved to go into architecture. I actually see this a lot in architecture all over the world, of people who are really doing amazing things with public and private and residential spaces to solve issues of people being isolated or disconnected with nature or with climate change that way. And I also see that with strategies, policies, startups, that sort of thing. So I think, well, it's easy for us to get, slogging in that quagmire of negativity and everything is going to pot. I also see that there really is incredible creativity and opportunities there.
Yeah, this year has really brought that out, I think. So, yeah, I think I see that too. So, I have one more question, and that is, if you could leave the listeners with one thought from today's show, what would you want that to be?
I think maybe just when it comes to traffic safety, to just be more empathetic to the world around you, and that's a good point for all of us actually in any life situation. Remember that what makes you a better driver also makes you a better person in all the other areas in life.
Mi Ae actually wrote a blog for me on my Soulfire Wisdom guest blog, and that was what it was about. It was about how your driving and your how it can affect who you are in the rest of your life.
Right.
So if people want to get in touch with you, want to follow your blog, how?
Yeah, so they can visit my website, which is drivingintherealworld.com. And the blog contains all kinds of videos, resources. You can contact me directly on the blog, or you can also email me at drivingintherealworld.com. And like you said at the top of the hour, I also do a daily Twitter feed. So @drivingreal is my handle. And we also have Driving in the Real World on Facebook as well. So.
Okay.
And I've also just recently started writing articles for a UK company called Bright Mile. So brightmile.io, they have a resources page, which has a blog. So I've just started to write articles. So if you want to subscribe to them, Bright Mile is actually a company that has an app for particularly for fleet and commercial or corporate drivers, people who have to drive for a living, but it uses positive social reinforcement for drivers to be safer. So,
Oh, okay. Great. Well, thank you for being here and sharing info about driver safety. I think it's an important topic that we don't really think about that often.
right. And we all should, because we're all in it. So thank you so much for having me on your show. It was really lovely, really an honor. Thank you.
So we have another great show planned for next week. Next week, my guest will be Laura Morrison. And Laura, through her own health challenges, discovered essential oils. And for the last, I think it's been 10 years or more, she's been a rep for Young Living. And I encountered her in networking. And even though I repped Young Living myself, I was so impressed with Laura because she has so much enthusiasm and knowledge about essential oils that, I just said, well, I want to have her come on and tell you about them because I like them. I just don't feel that passion that she does, even though I think they're great. So be sure to tune in next week and you'll see what I mean. So thank you again, Mi Ae, and thank you for listening. And join us next week. I'm just going to say bye for now.
All right, be safe.
You're listening to Soul Fire Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show. If we made you laugh, brightened your day, or sparked a new thought, we have succeeded in our mission. Join us next time when we'll share more secrets and truths and all the magic of transformation that is the journey to Soul Fire Wisdom. Always remember, be fierce in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.